Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
The Future of Canada, United versus Separated, is a 5-part series. Listen to all 5 parts on TalkDigitalNetwork.com, HouseStreet.com. This is part 4 of the 5-part series. We have 2 guests on today's show. Peter Downing, the founder of Wexit Canada, online at wexitcanada.com, and Frank Vaughan. He was the People's Party of Canada candidate in Ontario for the 2019 federal election. He's online at frankvaughan.ca. Peter, Frank, welcome to the Future of Canada, United versus Separated.
Hey, thanks, sir.
Peter, is gender fluidity a damaging ideology?
It's modern-day eugenics. It's modern-day sterilization of those who are deemed unfit. It's typically autistic kids who are influenced by activists to think that they're somebody that they're not. When it comes to children, I mean, if you want to be an adult, I mean, when I was going through university and I was studying normal psychology, gender dysphoria was back in the early 2000s, it was a mental problem. It was a pathology. Now it's being celebrated. There's an industry that's popped up around it. Obviously, there's the sterilization, the population control, the eugenics aspect of it, and again, further serving to destabilize, Western society. So, I mean, the reality is you want to mutilate yourself when you're an adult, go for it. You do with children, should be absolutely outlawed.
Yeah, so just to add to what Peter was saying there about gender dysphoria, in the DSM-5, which is the manual that psychologists still use, gender dysphoria is still a disorder. That hasn't changed. And I'm not trying to say that in a way of stomping all over what you said, Peter. I'm just trying to add to it. It's still considered a mental disorder, and the best possible outcome for it is treatment that gets the person to be comfortable with the body that they were born in. And the fact of the matter is that most people who experience gender dysphoria, at least up to 2019, I don't know what it looks like now because they're normalizing it, the majority of people who experience it, after some treatment by psychologists, lose those feelings of misidentification. So they recover. They become comfortable with the skin that they were born in. We are, if somebody as an adult wants to do something with their body, I don't have an issue with it. Where I draw the line that I should have to call, well, there's actually 2 lines. Number 1 is that I should have to call somebody by a particular pronoun that they want me to call them by, which is C16 in the federally and partly Bill 10 in Alberta, that I have to call somebody by their desired pronoun, whether it's he, she, they, zer, they. Some people want to be called they, and then I'm legally required to do that. I get around that by calling them by their first name. I won't do it. The other thing is that I was saying this to a person the other day, in a private conversation. When somebody nowadays says to me, I know this woman, I myself am a victim of the brainwashing because I think to myself, does he mean woman or does he mean like a man who became a woman? But I'm not supposed to ask that question because if I ask the question whether you're a male or just a male, I'm engaging in some sort of discriminatory behavior. This is absurd. The other thing that's absurd about it is the infiltration of biological males into women's sport, the infiltration of biological males into women's bathrooms, the Alberta under Notley, I don't know what's happening now under Kenny, but Alberta under Notley was putting in bathrooms in public schools that were mixed gender to make everybody feel comfortable. We're talking about a slim sliver of the population that children shouldn't even be engaging with. Children should be protected until they get to adulthood, and then they can make their own decisions. We are completely reforming society. I covered this in a video.
We're celebrating the stranger, the people that we would have been growing up and who would have been called strangers. Stay away from those people. Those people have wormed their ways into position of influence, positions around children, and we have been meant to open up your children, open up your access. And I mean, I'm just waiting for the day that I get publicly called out by one of these activists, and I'm just going to say, you're the guy my parents warned me about.
Well, and that day comes, just wear it like a badge, because it's this idea. Like, for instance, what you said about these, like transgender story time or all this other stuff. What bothered me about that is we as a society have decided, whether it's right or wrong, we have decided that teachers are not allowed to physically punish children. And then we've taken that a step further. Teachers are not allowed to physically touch children. We've put all these limitations on what teachers can do with their students. And then all of a sudden in 2018 and 2019, we can have people come into public libraries and they can wrestle around on the floor with your kids. And you're a bigot if you don't like it. That's a problem. And then we have in the United States, how many different drag queen story times found out that pedophiles infiltrated. They put on the garb, they go in and they're with your kids. And we're not supposed to talk about that either, because if we talk about the reality that pedophiles infiltrated these activities, we're supposed to be labeling all trans people pedophiles, which is not what we're doing. We're trying to highlight a problem, a glaring blind spot that we are creating. And furthermore, the video I did the other day was about somebody in Alberta who was complaining, a trans person who was complaining about the lack of access to endocrinologists and how it's discriminatory that endocrinologists can refuse to treat trans people based on either a moral or a business decision. The fact of the matter is, and this is what was lost, CBC didn't write about this, National Post didn't write about this, people with legitimate, life-threatening illnesses need the services of endocrinologists, and they're on a waiting list for them. And now that system's going to be clogged up by people who have identity issues. That's wrong, and we need to say that is wrong. And that is not to say that somebody can't do what they want, but stop trying to re-engineer society around your individual identity issues.
Well, I think part of it is they're going to continue the globalist mindset or whatever we've identified as being the enemy, and whether it be immigration's the pawn of the day or radical sexualization of children is the pawn of it. I think the better question we have to ask is, do you know what the problem is? And again, it's good to talk about it for those who don't quite get it yet, who are on our side, who can be convinced. So the real question is, what are we going to do about it to protect ourselves? And I think that's where we need to start to go next. And again, obviously we disagree on the approach. Our approach is separation. And again, maybe the worst case scenario is more of a economic, diplomatic and security partnership with the United States. Again, I don't want to open that up to debate. But I think where we should be going, because we are like-minded people, what do we do to solve the problem? And that's where I'd like to see kind of the next step of our political development going. And we need to do it quick. Frank, you're a federalist, right? I'm a separatist. Cool. I can put that aside to work with you and say, how do we protect ourselves? I think you're a new dad. How do we protect our children, our families, our future? How do we protect our parents who are being told, go euthanize yourself. You're too old. You're not worthy anymore. How do we fix this situation? Because we're behind the 8 ball. We do have to do something about it now.
Well, and to answer that question and to completely set aside the separatist-federalist divide for a second, the attack and the approach, to me, at this stage is at the cultural level. This is a failing of people. This isn't a failing of the state. This is a failing of the people. And that's where I differ from a lot of people. I put the blame squarely on the people themselves who refuse to stand up for this, or people who say, I would say something online, but I'm afraid I'll lose my Twitter account. Or I'll say something online, but it's going to cause me inconvenience with my so-called friends. They'll abandon me if I say anything. It's like, you know what? Put your children first, put the future first, put what's right first, and take that risk. I'm not trying to, I'm not the man on the mountain, but I put myself out there. I've been putting myself out there for 3 years. I've been talking about these issues. There's people who agree, there's people who disagree, but I get to keep living my life. I'm still living. I've still got friends. I've still got family. I've lost some people along the way, but they weren't with me in the first place. If that's all it takes, they weren't with me in the first place. People have got to find their courage at the cultural level to say enough is enough, to get public with their view that enough is enough, to put it online, to talk about it with their families, to say that this gender transitioning of kids is nothing more than state-sponsored child abuse. You need to say it out loud. You need to take the risk. And if we influence the culture, this is back to a question before about why politicians seem to be the worst kinds of people. They're sociopathic. They're like corporations, and I'm not anti-corporate. What I'm trying to say is a corporation has one job: resource extraction and profit generation. So wherever that is, the corporation will follow. That's why we see the birth of the non-GMO marketing in grocery stores. That's why we see the expansion of organic food aisles, because the public wants that and the corporations want to take that money. They want it. Well, politicians, they're cowards in general. That's why the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party are afraid to say anything, afraid to do anything until they public poll test it to death to figure out what you already think. They're only interested in giving you what they think you want. So if you change the culture, if you start rejecting this stuff, the politicians will follow eventually, because that's their nature. There's not a friggin' lick of courage amongst a lot of them. That's why they don't take stands. I like Max because he actually took a stand on a lot of things, it's rare. And one of the endearing qualities of Trump underneath the surface of his public demeanor is that he took a bunch of stances. It's the same with, in a way, and I know it's not perfect because he's still an advocate for mass immigration and stuff, but you look at Boris Johnson in the UK. He said, I will not allow immigrants to come to this country and treat it like their home country. He said, radical Islam is a problem that we have to deal with before it gets too hard in Britain. And he was lambasted in the media. Trump said many of the same things, lambasted in the media. And Boris Johnson won a landslide majority. Andrew Scheer lost to Trudeau, the worst prime minister we've ever had in the history of this country. And that includes Kim Campbell and Joe Clark. He lost to this guy. He didn't lose because he didn't take the Conservative Party far left enough. He lost because he was too far left and too milquetoast. You need a strong leader who's willing to tell the truth, and things change.
Peter, your thoughts on the ideologies of the left?
I mean, some of the things when it comes to, I've heard it said psychologically that the left is feminine and the right is masculine, and it's a care mentality versus a responsibility mentality. I don't know if that's completely accurate. There's a number of things that I care about when it comes to mental health, addictions, homelessness, First Nations issues, from a care perspective and from a doing the right thing by your neighbor perspective. And the duty, taking care of your friends and neighbors, but not, walking into their house uninvited. I think that if you look at the polarization side of it is the ideology of the left it's an ideology of envy. And it is something that, they're very good at working together, and it's not about building people up, it's bringing other people down. Now the right can be, some of the criticisms being, okay, well, some people are building themselves so much up that, they're using their power, whatever, to step on those who are weaker, and I think those criticisms are somewhat valid. That's why we have to have rules, and it's like hockey, you got referees and you got rules and you got red lines and blue lines and stuff like that, and I think that as long as the game is governed equally for everybody, you have those who are the most competitive and they win. So, and that becomes good for everybody. So the ideology of the left, again, it's how we define that term, but it's almost a maternal instinct sometimes. If you look at those segments of society or individuals or criminals, and we call the left bleeding heart, but it is sometimes because you have left-wingers who see that demographic as their own children, and that those of us who are on the right are being mean towards their children, no matter how misbehaved or bad their child is. They will go to bat for them and they'll have the mama bear instinct. So I've seen a lot of that, and I think some of those criticisms are valid. But leftism run amok, it's dysfunctional, and it is driving us towards socialism and communism, and we've got to decide how much further we want to let it go.
We'll have more with Peter Downing and Frank Vaughan right after the break.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Vaughan Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Vaughan's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at vaughanresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Peter Downing, founder of Wexit, and Frank Vaughan, who ran for the People's Party of Canada in Ontario in the federal election. He's a federalist. Peter, who's behind the worldwide group Antifa, and what should be done about it in Canada?
Well, I don't know who's behind the worldwide group of Antifa. We've seen the Key and Bexy from Rebel expose one of the head guys behind the Art Collective, one of them so-called anti-racist, but the reality is communist. Publications, a fellow down in Drumheller. I think they're trying to run him. Hopefully they run him out of his teaching job. He's a Catholic school teacher, I think at the high school level. But what should be done about them? These Antifa guys need to be declared a domestic terrorist organization, an illegal organization, and shut down with full enforcement. Just like you would never tolerate people walking down the streets brandishing swastikas, but we're tolerating people running around with a hammer and sickle. These guys need to be declared a terrorist organization and shut down.
Yeah, we absolutely enable communists, and we target. We target. People forget that National Socialism, which is the Nazi movement, was socialist. It had of the 25 planks, a lot of them were socialist. The misnomer is that it's a product of the right. There's this automatic linkage between Nazism and the right, when that is not an accurate linkage, because it was a large part of the left that actually delivered Hitler to power. I've got a picture on my desktop. It's from, I believe it's Manitoba, it might be Saskatchewan, of NDP members, and they're on the street, and they're posing with a bunch of hammer and sickle flags. And a year and a half, it might be 2 years ago now, I went to Ottawa to an event, and Antifa was there protesting it. And I walked among the Antifa people, and you see the hammer and sickle everywhere. And there were all these immigrants. I shouldn't say all these immigrants. There were two different couples. And they were trying to talk sense into these Antifa people and saying, we come from communism. And it is a regime that killed far more people than Nazi Germany ever could have. If people want a good read, it's a long read, but Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago. This was a book that not long ago, I'm looking at the first one right now, not long ago, we're talking sometime in the 1970s, achieved the highest accolade, I think a Nobel Prize, for exposing the horrors of communism in the Soviet regime. And now it's very hard to even find this book in print. It's almost like it's being slowly taken out of circulation. I don't know why the double standard. And we have a lot of talk at the federal level and at the provincial level about foreign influence on our elections. Just so happened that because Trudeau won, it was found that there was no foreign influence and everybody should go back to sleep, even though Greta Thunberg, who is
and Barack Obama.
And yeah, I was going to get there. Thunberg is a child that's been manipulated, and she's being used by her communist parents and by the people around them. She's manipulated. And Barack Obama,
17 years old.
Yeah. And Barack Obama comes here and openly campaigns basically for Justin Trudeau. And we have all this foreign money. The Tides Foundation, the PPC, was one of the things I liked about it, was the only party that in their platform was talking about the Tides Foundation and the influence it has on our country. And that's George Soros. That's an example of heavy funding by Soros. Not Peter, not me, the Tides Foundation. If we want to be fair, what we have to do is investigate foreign influence from all directions. And what we are doing is we lay out the red carpet. If you're a global socialist, you get to come into the country and you can spend as much money as you want. You can do whatever you want. You can campaign during a federal election for our leaders. But if you're someone on the right and you want to, say, have a Nigel Farage, or you want to have somebody come over and get involved, you're going to be under investigation. They're going to take away your charitable status. They're going to take away your foundation status. So it's absolutely a problem. And then, as well as the application, sorry, just to finish on this, what Peter was saying about the application of the law. Why is it that it took a lot of pressure from us? I'll tell you that. When we did the event in Hamilton with Ruben, I don't know if people are familiar with that. We had a gathering. We filled the McIntyre Center. There was 850 people, I think, that actually got in the door. The capacity was 1,100, but there were a bunch of violent protesters outside. They're punching people. There's a video of Antifa getting in the way of a little old lady with her walker. They're so friggin' brave. They're lucky I wasn't outside at that point. They got to punch people, commit violence, destroy property, do all this stuff. And if it wasn't for the enormous amount of pressure we applied, charges would have never been brought, because there's this tendency to allow, like, people like Yaniv, who punched Keen Bieksa. Was it yesterday outside of court, or the day before?
He's got to stop getting beat up, man. He's got to learn how to punch those dudes out.
Well, he's got to do something. But the fact is she going to get, or is it going to get charged? Will it face justice? Because that's what we're dealing with here. We don't, the leftists never seem to have to face up to the consequences of their actions. The police should be charging them and putting them through the system. There's absolutely a double standard, and it is a threat to Canadian democracy.
In Richmond, British Columbia, a suburb of Vancouver, Chinese government organizations openly support candidates running for mayor and for city council there, giving them checks that are actually beyond the election spending limits. Should foreign countries be allowed to secretly or openly support candidates for election in Canada, or in a separated Western Canada? Peter?
No, absolutely not. And I think what allowed, and this is the Conservatives' fault for not screaming bloody murder on this, is what allowed Barack Obama and what allowed Greta Thunberg to come here. And actually, we're the only organization that said, if Greta Thunberg slanders our oil sands industry and our investors, we'll look at passing information on defamatory libel to the police. And when they came, they literally said, no, we're not going to say anything about the oil sands. And they didn't, which was great. But it was because the Trudeau government changed the law. Before Trudeau, it was illegal for the type of foreign influence of Greta Thunberg, of Barack Obama. The Liberals changed the rules, and it took somebody having to point out that, yeah, they changed the rules. The Conservatives never said a thing about it. And so whether it be now or... Again, the whole concept of an independent Western Canada is to be able to save the best of Canada. It's basically cutting off the part of Canada that is irredeemably socialist. And again, through no fault of people like Frank or other solid conservatives or libertarian-minded people. It's a numbers game. It's an aging demographic of people who want to vote for people like Justin Trudeau, despite all the things that he's done. So, unquestionably, yes, we would eliminate foreign influence. 100%.
So yeah, I don't have a problem with people exercising their free speech. I do it when there's a U.S. election. I have no problem if Americans want to talk about our electoral realities and offer their opinions, because free speech is something we all share. But when it comes to money, there should be no foreign money involved in Canadian elections. Period. That's the spirit of the law right now, if it's not the practice of the law, and we should probably move the spirit of the law into full practice, especially at the local level, because the local level is an open door. It's an open door of infiltration and influence, and that's part of how these international agendas get by, is that these often local, overwhelmed governments pass things on that come down from the province that further these agenda. As far as being irredeemably socialist, I'm going to push back a little bit on that, because Alberta's got its own socialist language, and it was Alberta that elected Notley. I mean,
You're right there. Don't get
that's reality, and that's an issue for the Western separatists too. Is that you have a lot of liabilities that you would be assuming, whether it's with the native population, whether it's with healthcare, whether it's with pensions. That money's got to come from somewhere, and as I'm always asking, where does the money come from? Are you going to institute a private system? Will you phase out public funding of healthcare? Which, I mean, it's one option. I'm a big advocate for, I believe in universal coverage, but I also believe in private delivery under a universal system, like so many other OECD countries do. Our leaders, like Trudeau, and also the Conservative Party, tend to prop up the OECD countries, like they're examples. They're shining examples of healthcare, but they don't bother to tell us why their healthcare systems work. And a lot of it comes down to the efficiency of private delivery. So everybody has universal coverage, but the government is awarding private clinics that deliver services more cheaply and more efficiently, and it works very well.
Countries like where there's kind of like a forced healthcare savings account. So it's not necessarily you're sending your tax money to be dumped into general coffers and then some of it going back to healthcare. But it's that you have your own forced healthcare savings account so that when you need health services, you have money there to be able to pay for it. So it actually distributes the doctors and the resources a lot more efficiently instead of, government deciding how much toilet paper you have or how many cancer doctors you have or whatever the case. And we obviously know the waiting times, and people are either dying waiting in line or they're going to the U.S. It is more to the point of let's have the private clinics compete against each other. And obviously you have to have some, I worked in homeless shelters, and I like the fact that a homeless person, if they are legitimately sick, can legitimately go see a nurse or a doctor to get some sort of treatment or care. We don't want that person dying. We do believe in the value of life. So yeah, definitely, we have to at least bust the myth that the Canadian healthcare system is something that's enviable. It is not.
It's not. It's very expensive. It's one of the lower ranked in the OECD. It's this idea that we can't have even private clinics, for instance. So fully private clinics that offer their services in Canada. We have, I believe it's 50,000 a year. People can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's 50,000 a year that leave this country for care, either in the United States, predominantly in the United States, or they go to Europe to get care that they can't get here. And they take their money with them. And that money gets left behind. And we're one of the only countries in the world that it's basically illegal to have private delivery. And for those who are always talking about Tommy Douglas, this was another thing I had to educate my NDP peer on, because they like to bring up national health care and Tommy Douglas, but they forget the fact that Tommy Douglas wrote several recommendations. I think it was 8 recommendations, and our healthcare system only adopted 2, which is arguably one of the reasons why it's broken right now. So people need to stop the knee-jerk reaction. I encountered this when I was on the trail too, like talking to people about healthcare, and you say the word private and they knee-jerk, and I'm just like, okay, slow down. Let me explain to you what it is I'm talking about here. You don't lose your coverage. But you have more efficient delivery. And then I can cite examples. Quebec had the name escapes my memory right now. I've got it written down somewhere, but they had a private hospital. It was either I think it was in Montreal, actually. It could have been Quebec City, but I think it was Montreal. They had a private hospital. It was a trial run. It blew all performance indicators out of the water in Quebec, and in recognition of how it operated superiorly, and this was under universal medicine, the government was still the payer, it did so well that the Quebec government shut it down. So our governments aren't interested in efficiencies. They're interested in protecting established power groups. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And we do use private services a lot. In BC, you go to privately run radiology labs for your x-rays and ultrasounds. You get your lab tests done at a private clinic. So why not let a little competition in there? And again, we know private companies run more efficiently than government.
Well, it's their incentive. If they do well, they win, right? If they suck, they lose. That's the incentive of the private sector. There's nothing wrong with that. It's that people don't want winners and losers. They don't like this idea that some people are going to be left behind in the great game and that certain companies will fold. But that's the incentive to succeed. if you remove that incentive, you just get declining returns. I mean, look at Venezuela. That's the utopian model of years past. You have to have competition. Competition's the great incentivizer. It breeds performance.
We'll have more with Peter Downing and Frank Vaughan right after the break.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Peter Downing and Frank Vaughan. Peter, is a smaller federal government and more power to the provinces the answer to Western alienation?
Well, I think getting back to it, the opening up and fixing the Constitution to remove the very legitimate grievances we have and power imbalances that exist is the first step. And obviously, that's the ideal of how Confederation was supposed to work. I think all I can say is, again, the ability for that to happen is out of the hands of the West. That's completely, again, I'm speaking in broad strokes, a decision for Eastern Canada, or the more populous provinces, to make. But at the end of the day, if we do receive a mandate to separate, then we would see a model where, national services are very small. You talk about defense, diplomatic corps, that kind of stuff. If you look at the Constitution, it's supposed to be the federal services delivered are super, super small. You've got more ministers, almost twice as more federal cabinet ministers for each of the actual stipulated or constitutionally defined federal responsibilities. So 100%. One of the biggest problems is that the feds collect all the money, all the taxation, they generate it as revenue, but have very small responsibility to deliver services, and they use it as a bargaining chip through transfers to dangle over the head of the provinces who have all the responsibility for public service delivery, but very little money. That's how Canadian federalism works, is by Ottawa controlling and blackmailing the provinces.
And one of the focuses that the PPC adopted, which I really liked, was advocacy for a return to constitutionality, which I think would be a great first step towards revisiting federation and how it works. Because as Peter just said, there's only certain powers that have been delegated to the federal level. And what the federal government has done over the last 50 years under all governments is gradually move through the influence of collecting taxation, gradually move their influence into all spheres that were exclusive to the provinces. So one of the things that I loved was a focus and an emphasis on restoring provincial jurisdiction. Because the way this is supposed to work, and admittedly, it's not as great a model as the United States set up, and the Americans have their problems with federal overreach as well. But the way this is supposed to work is the provinces are supposed to be largely independent. They're supposed to have their own individual flavors that their people decide upon. They manage themselves as they see fit, and the citizens of Canada have a choice that if they don't like how things are going, say, in New Brunswick, and they like better what's happening in Alberta, they can relocate to Alberta freely without having to do too much in the way of struggling. Free travel between borders. The other thing, too, is the trade barriers. Interprovincial trade is supposed to be a jurisdiction the feds enforce and ensure that if you make a product in Alberta, that you can sell it in BC without facing provincial trade barriers. That's one of the powers that have been delegated to the federal government. And they don't enforce that power. They allow trade barriers to be erected, say, between New Brunswick and Quebec and BC and Alberta. That's one of the areas where the feds have power. Another area is projects that are in the national interest. So when it comes to Alberta's resources, my position has always been build every single pipeline that you can possibly imagine. You can have them going in all the cardinal directions as far as I'm concerned. And the federal government has the power already to impose those pipelines and get the job done, which would actually better represent the will of the people, because we don't want, the Canadian people themselves don't want those resources coming from tyrants. We'd like to home grow them. And it's not just oil. I mean, it's steel production. It's nickel production. It's copper. It's so many things. Canada's become this exporter of raw material when we could become a powerhouse of finished goods. And we decided sometime in the 1960s, I don't think the people decided, the feds decided that we were going to start importing our food, more and more of our food supply from outside the country. We were going to close down our canning facilities. We were going to deindustrialize and start manufacturing our stuff overseas, which turned into just getting out of the manufacturing business altogether and shipping raw materials to the outside world. A little bit of political and cultural will, and we could reverse that trend and actually build a fortified nation, a powerhouse in the world. I mean, we were on our way until about somewhere around Diefenbaker's time. The progress started moving the other way, and then Trudeau came in and it accelerated. We were on our way to becoming one of the industrial powerhouses in the world, with a strong military and a strong sovereign nation. And we've given it away, and I think it's time we take it back.
There are rumblings around what is currently going on with Justin Trudeau. He spent the holidays in Costa Rica without his wife and kids. What are you hearing?
I don't know. I see a bunch of stuff. I don't want to get into a dude's personal life. When it comes to that, I think that the whole picture of the beard, him in the liquor store, I think was just a preview of the beard that was to come, because that's all, the mainstream media can seem to talk about is his beard. So I don't make anything of it, one way or another. Regardless if he's a good guy or a bad guy, politics, and public service is going to put a lot of strain on a family. So I'll just leave it at that. I have no idea one way or another.
Yeah, I think it's apparent from the body language that there might be some problems going on there. Spending the holidays alone and all this stuff, it certainly seems to indicate a little bit of personal strife, but as Peter said, that's sort of his personal problem. It's not really the political problem. What concerns me more is that if he's having problems in his personal life and he's basically decided to abdicate responsibility of the PMO to Chrystia Freeland, and Freeland is, I mean, she's flanked by people who brag about the growing influence of foreign countries over our government. In one of the press conferences she did recently, she's literally flanked by people who brag about the fact that they represent foreign interests over Canadian interests. And she's very much dialed into that collective consciousness that I was talking about earlier, of which, the favorite demon online is George Soros, but he's only one piece. He's just a piece of it. But she's very much dialed into that globalist philosophy that wants to deconstruct Canada. I mean, I think their game, to be completely honest with you, is division. I think they're trying to push this country towards breaking up and trying to create a constitutional crisis. That's what they want, because into that vacuum, they'll be able to flow. I mean, by breaking the country up, we're actually giving them what they want. That's their desire. That's their desired outcome. And I don't want to see them get it. Back to the question, I think he's got to be in a bad state, because unless it comes to something very high profile, like the Iranians shooting down a jet, and it certainly doesn't, it doesn't seem to be, I think the question should be asked is, why would they deliberately do that? Not how, if it wasn't an accident. Everybody's parroting this idea that it was an accident. I don't know. I think we should eliminate motive from that equation before we jump to the conclusion that it was an accident. But until that happened, he was invisible. And I think that situation was at such a level that he had to come out in public. And to my eyes, he doesn't look steady. To be quite honest with you, I don't think he's leading the country right now. I think the Liberal Party, other people in the Liberal Party are, and he's just the face. He's there because he's got that last name. That's all.
Peter, could you say anything nice about Justin Trudeau?
I like his beard. I don't know. I don't know the guy personally. I've never met him personally. I've met a number of other politicians, and Bill Gettereed. I think what he's doing is very bad for the country. It's very bad for Western Canada, and then it's Western Canadian interests that I represent. So no, I don't think he's done anything good, anything constructive in his time in office. He's openly confessed to wanting to phase out our industry, as Stephen Harper did before. And no, there's nothing I can say nice about his performance in office, and I don't know him as a person. So that's probably all I can say there.
I think he's a better skier than I am, so I give him full credit there. He does have nice hair, but mine's far more beautiful than his. And aside from that, you do have to give him credit for hoodwinking so much of the population. The guy's vacuous. He doesn't say anything. All he does is show up, smile, and look like Mr. Nice Guy. And he's managed to fool consistently 30 to 35% to 38% of the population. So you got to give him credit. It takes talent. So that's about all I can say. I'm not sure if that's nice, but I'll give him credit for it.
Thank you very much for being on the show, gentlemen.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good. I enjoyed it.
Listen to part 5 of this interview with Peter Downing from Wexit Canada and Frank Vaughan from frankvaughan.ca online at talkdigitalnetwork.com, housestreet.com. If you have any questions for our guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.